Ever heard of a king who spent less than a year of his decade-long reign in his own kingdom, yet became one of its most legendary heroes? Today, we're diving into the epic, turbulent, and absolutely fascinating life of Richard the Lionheart. Forget the fairy tales. The real story is even more incredible. Richard was born in 1157, not as the heir to the English throne, but as the third son of the powerhouse couple, King Henry II of England and Eleanor of Aquitaine. Imagine your family dinners. Now, imagine your family controls a massive empire stretching from the borders of Scotland to the Pyrenees Mountains in Spain. Richard grew up in a world of political intrigue, power plays, and constant conflict, not just with rival kingdoms but within his own family. His mother, Eleanor, one of the most remarkable women of the Middle Ages, favored Richard. She made him the Duke of Aquitaine in modern-day France, a territory he loved and ruled with an iron fist. From a young age, Richard wasn't just a prince. He was a warrior, a strategist, and a poet. He was a true product of the chivalric age, honing his skills on the tournament fields and the battlegrounds of his own duchy. But peace was never a long-term guest in the Plantagenet family. Richard, along with his brothers Henry the Young King and Geoffrey, grew tired of waiting in the wings. They wanted real power, not just titles. So, what did they do? They rebelled against their own father, Henry II. This wasn't just a teenage tantrum. It was a full-blown war, fueled by ambition and encouraged by their mother, Eleanor, and the King of France. Richard proved himself a formidable military commander during these family feuds. His reputation for bravery and ferocity in battle grew with every campaign. It was during these early conflicts that he earned his legendary nickname, Richard the Lionheart. He was bold, relentless, and seemed to fear nothing. While these rebellions ultimately failed, they set the stage for the dramatic events to come. After the deaths of his elder brothers, Richard suddenly found himself as the heir to the English throne and the vast Angevin Empire. In 1189, his father, King Henry II, died a broken man, famously lamenting that his own sons had deserted him. At the age of 32, Richard was crowned King of England. But here's the twist. England was never his priority. For Richard, England was primarily a source of funds, a treasure chest to finance his true passion, the crusade. Just months after his coronation, news from the Holy Land was dire. Jerusalem had fallen to the great Muslim leader, Saladin. The call for a new crusade, the Third Crusade, echoed across Europe, and Richard answered it with unparalleled zeal. This was his chance for eternal glory, to fulfill his duty as a Christian king, and to test his military genius against the best in the world. He emptied the royal coffers, sold off titles and lands, and even famously joked that he would sell London itself if he could find a buyer. He raised a massive army and fleet and set off for the Holy Land in 1190, alongside his great rival, King Philip II of France. The journey itself was an adventure. Richard conquered Sicily to secure his funds, and then sailed on to Cyprus, which he also conquered after its ruler mistreated his shipwrecked sister and fiancée. In just a few months, Richard had added a new island kingdom to his collection before even reaching his main destination. This was typical Richard: audacious, opportunistic, and incredibly effective. When the Lionheart and his army finally arrived in the Holy Land in 1191, the Crusader forces were bogged down in a long, grueling siege of the strategic port city of Acre. Richard's arrival was like a shot of adrenaline. His energy, leadership, and siege engines broke the stalemate. Acre finally surrendered, a massive victory for the Crusaders. However, the victory was marred by a brutal act. Frustrated with the slow pace of prisoner exchange negotiations, Richard ordered the execution of nearly 3,000 Muslim prisoners. It was a shocking and ruthless decision that stained his reputation, but was, in his mind, a necessary military move to allow his army to advance. With Acre secured, Richard began his march south towards Jerusalem. This campaign is where his military legend was truly forged. He faced Saladin's army in the open field at the Battle of Arsuf. Despite constant harassment from Saladin's archers, Richard's discipline and perfect timing led to a decisive charge that shattered the Muslim lines. It was a stunning tactical victory that proved the Lionheart was a master of the battlefield. He marched his army to within sight of Jerusalem, the ultimate prize. But he did it twice, and both times he made the agonizing decision to turn back. Why? Richard was a pragmatist. He knew that even if he could capture the city, he couldn't hold it once the bulk of the Crusader army returned home. The supply lines were too long, the enemy too close. It was a heartbreaking but strategically sound decision that many of his fellow Crusaders couldn't understand. Though he never took Jerusalem, Richard did negotiate a truce with Saladin, a man he had come to respect as a worthy adversary. The Treaty of 1192 guaranteed Christian pilgrims safe access to Jerusalem and left a strip of coastline in Crusader hands. It wasn't the total victory he had dreamed of, but it was a significant achievement. His part in the crusade was over. Now for the journey home. And if you thought the crusade was dramatic, you haven't heard anything yet. Shipwrecked in the Adriatic, Richard was forced to travel overland through the territory of his enemy, Duke Leopold of Austria, whom he had insulted back at the siege of Acre. Of course, he was recognized and captured. This was a major European scandal. A crusading king on his way home, imprisoned for ransom. The Duke handed him over to the Holy Roman Emperor, who demanded an astronomical sum for his release, 150,000 marks, a figure so large it was twice the annual income of the entire English crown. Back in England, his younger brother John was plotting to seize the throne. The legend of Robin Hood, stealing from the rich to pay the king's ransom, is born from this very moment in history. Richard's mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, worked tirelessly, raising the colossal sum through heavy taxation. After more than a year in captivity, the ransom was paid, and the Lionheart was free. He returned to England in 1194, but only for a few weeks. He needed to put his brother John in his place, get himself recrowned to wash away the shame of his captivity, and, you guessed it, raise more money. His real focus was now on reclaiming the lands in France that King Philip had seized while he was away. The final 5 years of Richard's life were spent in a relentless war against his old rival. He was back in his element, campaigning in the lands he loved. He built the magnificent Château Gaillard, a masterpiece of military architecture, to defend his Norman territory. It was a symbol of his power and his determination. But the Lionheart's luck was about to run out. In 1199, while besieging a minor, insignificant castle called Chalus-Chabrol, he was struck in the shoulder by a crossbow bolt fired by a lone defender. The wound wasn't immediately fatal, but it turned gangrenous. As he lay dying, Richard showed a final act of chivalry. He ordered the man who shot him to be brought forward. Instead of executing him, Richard pardoned him and ordered he be given a sum of money. The great warrior king, the Lionheart, died at the age of 41. He had reigned for 10 years but spent only a matter of months in England. So what is his legacy? Was he a great English king? Not really. He saw England as a piggy bank for his foreign wars. But was he a legendary figure? Absolutely. Richard the Lionheart embodies the medieval ideal of the warrior king. His courage was unquestioned, his military skill was brilliant, and his life story is pure drama, from family betrayals to holy wars and daring escapes. He was a complex, flawed, and utterly captivating character who galloped out of the pages of history and straight into legend. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the life of Richard the Lionheart. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. See you in the next one.